I remember watching one of these shows on Netflix, Love is Blind. Did you see that? Did you see the ending
I think
of that?
I heard about that. But...
Oh, I watched it, and don't judge me out there. There's a couple things I watch with my wife or whatever, and it's just entertainment. Plus, you learn a lot about young people dating these days. So in some ways, I feel like it informs me as a pastor. And what happened at the end of this episode that everybody's been talking about is you had two young ladies walk away from the groom at the altars.
Wow.
And their reasoning is you did not agree with me on politics.
Yep.
And it was shocking. Of course, most people said, hey, those guys, they did them a favor. They dodged a bullet, you know. But it's a serious issue that these types of matters, like you said, in some ways, this last election, you saw a lot of the country be less polarized, right? And you saw a lot of movement.
Yes.
In a conservative direction. So less being polarized. But like you're saying, behind the scenes and deeper dive, among the two genders, there is a polarization. And that's
right.
Interesting. And do you think it's possibility that we're going to go from an attack against males as we have been to now there's an attack against females that's coming?
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned on that, on the one side, again, a lot of the statistics that we've seen come out post-election, and some of this is stuff that has only come out in the last couple of weeks because it takes a lot of time to do a deep dive in some of the post-election mindset and some of the post-election numbers. But one of the most shocking statistics that I saw was they essentially found that almost every demographic group in the country moved to the right. Now, again, it doesn't mean that they all voted Republican, they all voted conservative, but even among groups that voted more liberal, more progressive, more Democrat, even those ones shifted. They were not as leftist, not as progressive as they were in past election cycles. The only one group that we basically found out that did not shift to the right was essentially white women with a college degree.
Wow.
It was really interesting to see. Most of these other groups were moving towards the right, and that was kind of the one exclusive group that seemed to get even more progressively left.
Do you think, since the common factor was college education, that's where maybe the disconnect is happening? That's where the indoctrination is happening.
I absolutely do. And I think that's why it's going to be so important, whether we're talking about groups like Cal Baptist or Gateways, to really be able to continue to be a counterpoint and to, again, train up their students to know they're going to be going into a workplace, going into careers with people that have a diametrically opposed view on a lot of these different issues. And I think it's going to be valuable for the young men and especially the young women to be able to, again, if you want to be an effective ambassador and a witness for Christ on some of these issues, you want to be able to explain why you think that children in the womb are worthy of protection. You want to explain, again, why no, there actually are two genders and biology matters. It doesn't just matter how you identify or what you say. It's going to really be that much more incumbent on our institutions and our churches to be able to give them opportunities to say, as Peter asked us, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within us.
Yes.
Welcome to the GC Collective podcast, brought to you by the California Southern Baptist Convention. From local missions to global impact, we explore the vision, passion, and heart behind our collective movement in California and around the world. Where better together isn't just a motto, it's how we maximize our impact in fulfilling the Great Commission.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GC Collective. This is Jason Robertson, and with us today is Sarah.
Hello.
And Jonathan.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here.
This is Jonathan's second time, actually, to be on the podcast.
I know. I feel honored that I got invited back.
A returning guest.
This is really special. Jonathan, where are you from?
So I am with California Family Council, and we are a state-based public policy group. If you have ever attended one of the conventions, annual meetings, I usually get to go up and speak at those or play a video at those. We always have a booth for California Family Council. And if you are more often, if you're at one of the meetings here at the lovely Fresno offices of the CSBC, you've probably even seen me around more, because our office at California Family Council is literally like 1 block to the east of here.
Yeah, so you say you usually get to talk, but it's actually in our governing documents that
That's
California
right.
Family Council gets stage time at the annual meeting.
That is true, and that is because about 20 years ago, prior to my time with the organization, we actually merged with the CSBC entity, which used to be called the Committee on Moral Concerns.
Yes.
So some of you know our dear friend, my former boss, former board member, Phil Kell. Dr. Kell was formerly at the convention, he was formerly at the foundation.
Right.
Now he's here at the convention doing some work as well. But he used to be for a long time on the board of the Committee on Moral Concerns. And when he was there, the Committee on Moral Concerns merged with California Family Council back in the early 2000s. And the entire idea behind it was that we would continue doing what we had been doing apart, but we would now be able to do it together, because as we all know, we are better together.
Good job. Well done.
So
Way
there
to
you go.
pull
Just
that
got to
in.
slide that in. That's for you, Pete, if you're listening.
I've heard of the flower committee and the lunch committee, but the Committee on Moral Concerns.
Doesn't it
That's
just
right.
sound vintage Southern Baptist?
That's
the
right.
most serious committee I've ever heard of.
That's right. Well, and this goes back again. This is before my time. So if there are any of the long-standing historians, or if Phil, Dr. Kell, if you're listening to this, I apologize if I get anything wrong. But the idea behind this was similar to, on the national level, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and the idea is it would be a Southern Baptist related entity that would be able to speak on particular issues of maybe not pure gospel related focus, but things that are happening in the culture that Scripture very does clearly speak to. So our mission statement, again, if you've not seen me speak before, if you've not watched one of our videos, our mission statement at California Family Council is advancing God's design for life, family, and liberty through California's church, capital, and culture. And very intentionally, we obviously mentioned those 3 kind of spheres of influence. Church is the first, because if you were ignoring God's people, if you're ignoring the body of Christ, nothing else is going to matter. Nothing else is ultimately going to change. But we also look at ways that we can help the church be involved in those other 2 arenas, which is the capital, whether it's in Sacramento or it's in Washington, D.C., but also the culture. And obviously in today's modern society, culture is a kind of a big catch-all term. It doesn't just mean what we're seeing at the school board. It doesn't just mean what we're seeing in government, but it also could mean the media. We're talking about social media. We're talking about the news. We're talking about radio, television, all these different types of areas that the body of Christ should have a public witness. We should be salt and light. And that's what our mission is to try to equip believers to be active in those spheres on those issues, the issues of life, God's design, and the sanctity of human life, the issues of the family, whether it's parental rights, whether it's God's design for gender, human sexuality, and then on liberty, that's more on, I think, the religious freedom types of things, and ways that we're bringing the voice of the church to bear in the public square.
Seems like a really big job for California.
Yes. The way that I always say is it is having this job in California as compared to other parts of the country. We work with allies around the nation. We have about 40 other states that have family policy councils like us. And I'd say the difference between us as opposed to Alabama or Texas, Oklahoma, I say in California, it is rarely fun, but at least it's never boring.
Well, that's the thing that comes to my mind is in California, as a pastor, and I've pastored in other states, I don't feel like this state is as church friendly as other states. Am I right or wrong about that?
Yeah, I think that would be true, and I'll give one example on this. It's a little bit controversial, but I was talking to some friends from looking back. We just celebrated a few months ago the anniversary of COVID and the lockdowns happening.
Anniversary? We celebrated the anniversary?
I should say not celebrated. We marked the anniversary. Okay. It was the 5th anniversary, all the way back in March. It was the 5th anniversary of the COVID lockdowns, which I know it's crazy to think that was 5 years ago. But the thing that kind of blew me away was I was thinking about how long-standing everything was here in California and how we were still dealing with lockdowns and mask mandates and vax mandates and everything like that going into mid to late 2021. And even some of them were even into 2022 before the midterm elections in 2022, when Gavin Newsom was running for re-election and you had all the other things happening. And I was talking to friends in the rest of the nation, and they were like, well, what are you talking about? COVID here in Florida or Georgia, like that was like 6 weeks. We were done with that by the end of April. And it really does show, I think, what a difference it makes being in one state versus another. And that's a small example, but I think it really applies to so many other aspects.
I think it pulled the curtain back.
Right.
Because we were called non-essential. And in my view, as a pastor, they first come out whenever the greatest fear about COVID was coming out, when nobody really knew what it was. And they were saying there could be millions of people die. And I thought to myself, that's a lot of funerals.
Sure.
If any place is going to be essential, it'll be the organizations that handle burying people and handling grief.
Yep.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. No, I was like, this, we're going to be needed more now than ever.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, and it's something, to your point, Jason, there was, I think, a lot of hospitals that were not only were they denying the rights of churches to meet in person, congregations to gather, but they were in some cases even denying pastors and chaplains the ability to go and minister to people on their deathbed.
Yeah.
And that's something that it is a reminder. I think in a lot of ways, I don't know if like any of the rest of you, I have probably a little bit of PTSD from 2020 going back and thinking about how crazy that time was, especially I'll say personally for my family and I, my wife was 8 months pregnant when the whole country started to lock down, and we're looking in California thinking this is our second child. We already were signed up at the hospital, all ready to go. And we start hearing these stories out of the other huge blue state in the country, New York. And we were seeing what was happening in California. We were kind of following everything that New York was doing about 2 weeks later. And I'm hearing these stories of moms that husbands are having to drop their wives off in the parking lot at the ER. Husbands can stay in the car in the parking lot, but they can't go inside. They can't be with their wife. And I'm hearing all these horror stories of moms that are giving birth in the hallway on a gurney because there's no rooms available for them because all the rooms are filled with COVID patients. And so my wife and I at that time, 2020, were like, no, that's not going to be a thing. So we ended up actually having our son at home in 2020. As a result of that, we met a midwife. Everything ended up working out great for us, but it was just a reminder when you look back and you remember some of the craziness of 5 years ago, you really do realize what a difference the local government, the state government makes, and it applies on so many different issues. I mean, now we're going to talk about it, I know, but you're seeing it on all these other issues that we're talking about, whether it's the pro-life issue, whether it's on parental rights, whether it's on boys playing in girls' sports. I mean, so many different issues. We do have a different experience here in California than you do in Florida or Texas or Georgia.
Right. Yeah. So we're here on the backside of a new election cycle, I guess, right? And just to pull back the curtain for our listeners, we always kind of sit down before we do a recording and we say, okay, let's make sure we have all of our talking points in a row. And we really sort of got stymied here thinking in this polarized world right now that even the church is finding that they're on one side or the other of debate, and it's not necessarily the way it used to be where the whole church was on one side.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think that's absolutely true. I think we've seen over the last 10 years, and I mean, let's just be honest. This goes back before Donald Trump ever came down the escalator there at Trump Tower in New York. Yeah. There's always been levels of division within the church on different political issues, among different candidates. I mean, I know we all probably have members of our family that are Republicans, members of our family that are Democrats. Yeah. We have people that have lots of different ideas and positions on things. And I think it really has been, though, in the last probably 10 years that it feels like things have really ratcheted up a lot of the intensity. And I know it's easy to blame some of that on Donald Trump, and let's be fair, I think he probably deserves some of that blame in some cases. But I think a lot of it also has to do just with the changes in social media, the changes with online culture, and the fact that unfortunately, I think a lot of times we have gotten so much more in our individual silos and bubbles.
Yes.
Instead of going to church with people who look different than you, they maybe have a different socioeconomic status, maybe they grew up differently, maybe their immigration status is different than you. It's a lot different for us now, or it's a lot easier, I think, for us now to kind of get into these little bubbles. And we're only following the people that we agree with on Facebook. We're only reading the people that we like on Twitter. We're only kind of in these little bubbles. And I think it's really important for us as Christians to remember that Jesus did not call us to stay in kind of a holy huddle and to just be only focusing on the people that we always agree with, but we're supposed to go out there and be salt and light. And that means you're going to encounter people you disagree with, and you have to do it lovingly and respectfully. Yeah,
in fact, the churches, the surveys that are coming out recently, here we are several months since the election, is finding that young men are headed back to church.
Right.
They're more conservative. They're more seeking biblical truth. There's a rejection of the church growth movement, the shallowness, the entertainment-driven church. And men have been beat up a lot in the last 5-10 years or whatever in the media and in culture and in society.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And we're seeing that the young, I'm talking about the below 30-year-old men are coming back to church.
Right.
They're not necessarily coming back to maybe a church of a denomination, for us Southern Baptists. Some of them are starting new churches, non-denominational churches. So it's not like it's coming back to the old way. It's not that at all. It's not a coming back to what we used to have. It's actually the start of something new.
Right.
And we as a church, even as Southern Baptists, need to be very aware of that. And it is tied into things that are in politics and so forth, in culture and in society. There's a new movement coming.
I think that's 100% true. And I think maybe one of the most shocking things that I think churches are going to have to start grappling with is, on the one hand, like you said, you're seeing this resurgence of young men who are trying to find some sort of healthy masculinity. They've seen kind of a pushback on traditional forms of masculinity, and you're seeing now an effort to have, whether it's more of kind of a gym bro, kind of a fitness culture, or I think on the bad side, you see people like Andrew Tate, some of these people that are like, I think, legitimately toxic masculinity. But there's this effort, I think, among a lot of young men to say, okay, I understand that may not be right, but I also don't like this idea that you're telling me that if I speak up to say I don't want a biological boy playing on my daughter's soccer team, you're telling me that I'm transphobic, or you're telling me that I'm a hater. You're telling me you're going to cancel me for that. They're like, no, that's not going to fly. So I think the church has a really unique opportunity to try to disciple and mentor this next generation of young men to say, no, there is a healthy masculinity that is involved with being a protector, with being a provider, with being a loving servant leader of your family, not a domineering king, but being this loving, sacrificial servant who is going to take care of your wife, take care of your kids, and raise up your sons to this next generation of healthy.
You're mentioning wife and kids. These young men are embracing marriage, what we would consider biblical views, or traditional conservative views at the least, of marriage, parenting. And they're wanting to be around church groups that will teach them biblically, theologically.
Right.
Don't just give me, the old Sunday school lesson type of stuff. No, they actually are saying, we're here to learn.
Right.
They are very in tune with people that will take their time and dive deep into certain topics and issues. And these young men are wanting to get it right.
Right.
That's what they're wanting to do. They just want to get it right. And it may be a rejection of a couple of generations before them as they look at that. But we're also in an information age. They can go online now. When I was growing up, I didn't have internet. Right. Now you've got not only internet, but you've got where you can go find real quality stuff, and you can learn. There's no excuse to be ignorant.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And these young men are taking real pride in the fact they're not ignorant.
Right.
And so I think churches need to step up and make sure we're filling in that void, or we're meeting that need, and we're speaking out. And that's what your organization's all about.
Absolutely. So I think for us at California Family Council, just to clarify, we are a 501c3 Christian ministry. We are not a political organization. We don't endorse candidates. But with all that being said, I think it is that important, both for groups like us and for each individual church, to make sure that you are providing kind of a counterpoint to what you're seeing. On the one hand, you don't want the young men that are in your congregation, whether they're high school or college or whether they're young dads, on the one hand, you don't want them to only be hearing the stuff that is coming out of the mainstream media, right, which inevitably tends to be very aggressively anti-Christian in the way it's talking about life and marriage and family and things like that. But on the flip side, I think sometimes nature abhors a vacuum. And if the church is not stepping up and providing a biblical Christ-centered view of both manhood and also womanhood, masculinity and femininity, either that is going to be filled by, the vacuum is going to be filled either by the mainstream media on the left or the mainstream culture on the left, whether it's music or television or things like that, or it's going to be filled, like you were saying, Jason, on the right. You see some of these kind of very aggressive, almost hyper-masculine groups that are coming in that sometimes they get things right and they do have a counterpoint to some of the stuff we're seeing over here. But if they are only addressing some of the deficiencies over here, but they don't have the full spectrum of God's truth, that can get out of balance as well. And I think it's so important that churches provide that necessary antidote so that you're not seeing young men that are getting radicalized on the other side of things. And the crazy thing, sad thing about this is that, as you mentioned, as we're seeing young men coming back to church, one of the counterpoint statistics I saw in one of these recent studies was that young women, unfortunately, are going almost the opposite direction. They are becoming, sadly, in a lot of cases, even more aggressively secular and progressive, especially as it comes to some of the misinformation you're seeing about abortion or about LGBT issues or things. And I think, again, this is going to be a real unique opportunity for churches to try to bridge this gap. In some cases, we're not talking about, a 10 or even 20% gap on positions on things. In some cases, you're seeing literally a 60 to 80% gap where you survey young men about one thing and there may be 80% on this side. The young women are literally the opposite. 80% on the other side. Wow. And I mean, again, if you imagine, we're looking towards the future. If you have some of these young men and young women that are getting married, man, there's going to be a whole lot of marriage counseling for churches as we're looking into the future.
It's really odd to me that you're talking about women and, educated women with college degrees, sort of dug in a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about some of these trans issues, because one of the things that I have not been able to articulate well, and maybe you can help me, is how the way we treat women, according to what the media wants us to believe or whatever, are contradicting themselves. Women are supposed to be protected and elevated, but then men in sports somehow does not hurt the female agenda or the progression of women in society. So I don't understand how that makes sense.
I totally agree. Well, there was this really kind of shocking study that came out a couple of months ago. I don't know how widespread it was, but it was something that I saw, especially, I don't even know if it was a study or it was just something that I saw repeated a lot on social media. Sarah, I don't know if you saw this, but it was this question that they kept asking people, and people were reposting it on Facebook and Instagram with their own answers. And the question was, if you were a single woman and you were hiking in the woods, would you rather meet a man or a bear?
Yeah.
And I was blown away by the number of young women, and by young, I don't mean 12, I mean like 20s, 30s, 40s, that said, oh, a bear, absolutely. Yeah. It would be so much safer to meet a bear in the woods than a man. And the idea was, well, you just don't understand. I've had all these bad experiences, whether it was on public transit, or I was walking by a construction site and I got catcalled, and the danger of being by myself in the woods with a strange man, who knows what could happen. And like you were saying, all the men were like, no. Like, okay, I agree. Are there some men that are bad and there's a potential of danger? Sure. But a bear will kill you.
Well, it's 100% dangerous.
And I think there's just this kind of psychological conditioning that's happened over the last several years. When I saw that, I was thinking, man, that is the fact that, on the one hand, it is tragic that I know there are a lot of women that have had very negative, and not just bad comments, but they've actually had sexual harassment or abuse from men, and that is tragic, and that's something that we as a culture, and especially as churches, we should work to address. But to your point, Sarah, the idea that on the one hand you can recognize the potential dangers of meeting a man alone in the woods, while at the same time, some of these same individuals that were making those statements would then turn right around and say, yeah, but trans women are women. And if you are a biological male who wants to play on a high school or college girls sports team, you want to swim for a girls swimming team, you want to play soccer or volleyball, well, then who am I to question your gender identity?
And all women get pushed down.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of our staff members at California Family Council, if you follow us online, we have this great young gal outreach director named Sophia Laurie. She's a former collegiate athlete, and to all the CBU people, I'm sorry, she did go to Vanguard. She didn't go to CBU, but I mean, she was an NAIA athlete. She played all 4 years. She got a scholarship. She played all throughout junior high school, and the fact that she has now gone multiple times to speak out at the CIF meetings, the California Interscholastic Federation that governs high school sports. She's spoken at the national meetings for the NCAA. And the fact that you have these institutions, whether they're state institutions or national institutions, I mean, forget about the fact that it's President Trump that signed the executive order. 10 years ago, if you were saying that any president had signed an executive order saying, yeah, you can't be a biological man and play in girls' sports, that would just be the most common sense thing ever.
Right.
And the fact that now it seems controversial and you have these supposed champions of women's rights that are saying, no, we're going to actually defy federal guidelines. We're going to thumb our nose at the Federal Department of Education to keep allowing men, biological men, and be delicate how I say this, but when I'm talking about men, I'm talking about biological men who have identified as a female, but have not had any physical or chemical procedures or processes to alter their biology. I'm talking about, I mean, again, you can use your imagination. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But we're talking about young men that are fully male, sharing locker rooms, sharing changing facilities. I mean, we had at our California Family Council dinner in Orange County about a year ago, we had Riley Gaines come and speak to us. She was a swimmer, and she talked about the fact that having to go and share a locker room with a biological male, having to change your clothes next to a biological male, you would think, again, Jason, getting to the idea of masculinity, the thing that she talked about was, on the one hand, she was furious and upset with the government institutions. On the other hand, she asked this question to a room full of people in Orange County. She said, where are the dads?
Yeah.
I mean, again, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, if you're in the 1950s, I don't care if you're in the most liberal suburb in the country, you had a biological man that goes in and changes in a girl's locker room. That would happen about one time, and that would be over.
It would be over. Well, let me ask you a question. When you talk about this particular topic, the men and women's locker rooms and sports and so forth, what is the divide as far as the public? Is it really? It's not. It can't be a 50-50 thing.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Why is it so difficult to get this stuff taken care of? Who are these voices, and how do they have so much influence in our state government?
Well, I think looking at this, again, dispassionately, I'm just giving you my analysis here as a person who's been with California Family Council for the last 11 years, and before that was with another organization for 10 years on similar issues. I do think that there is a huge spiritual component to this, where there is this deception that the enemy is really trying to attack going all the way back to the book of Genesis.
Right. It's demonic.
It is. It's demonic. And the fact that it says, Genesis 1:27, my two little boys, I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, we have a scripture memory tape, GT and the Halo Express. So I love the fact that I hear my little 4-year-old walk around the house singing Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. I mean, that's literally not just even in the first book of the Bible, it's in the first chapter of the Bible. And I think the fact that that is where so much of our confusion and our deception comes in today, it shows that the enemy of our souls really has a vested interest in trying to confuse the very created order that God has made. Because if you get gender and sexuality confused, it breaks the relationships between men and women. It breaks the relationships between mothers and sons and daughters and fathers. It really just completely confuses things. And I think, again, this is something that when you hear a politician like Donald Trump say that it's common sense, or you even hear the last couple of weeks, you hear someone like Gavin Newsom say, he said on his podcast, it's that he agrees it's an issue of fairness and it's not fair for biological men to play with women's sports. A lot of times you hear that referred to as common sense. The other way that you can refer to that, though, is something that is called natural law. And at Southern Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, there is a great ethics professor there, a good friend of mine, Dr. Andrew T. Walker. And he has talked about this a lot. He has this great phrase that is essentially, the natural law finds a way. And the idea being that when you say common sense, natural law is just kind of a philosophical, fancy, theological way of talking about common sense. It's that God sets certain things into the very fabric of reality. And we can try to deny those things. We can try to, as it says in Romans, we can suppress the truth in our unrighteousness. But eventually, that natural law, that design that God has put into the fabric of creation, that's going to find a way to break out and to show through. And for people who maybe were not raised in church, for people who are Donald Trump or Gavin Newsom, people who maybe don't have the, I would say to be fair, since I'm saying both on the right and the left there, people who maybe don't have the most active church life. I think in some cases, just the reality that God has written, the law that God has written on men's hearts, it comes through, and sometimes the only way they know how to express that is say, well, it's common sense.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we're seeing. And that's why I think latest polls on that have actually shown that it is, at least on the issue of men playing in girls' sports, that is close to an 80-20 issue.
Right.
Wow.
That's right. And churches need not be afraid of that 20%.
100%. Correct.
Right? 100% correct.
100% of the 20%.
Yes.
That is right.
So
And we need to be gracious.
Yeah.
We need to be biblical. We need to be forthright in this teaching. It is an attack against every woman, every female,
That's right.
every daughter in our church.
Yeah.
And we need to lovingly, graciously, wisely stand up and speak out against it. Don't
Right.
be afraid.
That's right.
So I hear you both saying that you guys both see this as a demonic attack,
Yeah.
Which I had never considered before. So how do churches engage with this? Because now suddenly I feel a burr.
Sure. Well, this is something where, again, I'll say we are blessed in that when you're talking about a whole lot of other issues, I'll just give you another example here. One of the other key issues, ironically, that we've been talking about here in the first couple months of this new administration is the issue of tariffs.
Right.
I will tell you, as someone who's been involved in politics for 20 plus years, I do not think the Bible has a clear yes or no answer on tariffs. I think that there are a lot of people, and I've heard people on both sides of this issue literally that make very compelling cases. Yeah. I don't think that if you are a pastor, it would be wise or prudent for you to get up there and say, this is the biblical case for or against tariffs. I mean, if God's really put that on your heart, then send me the sermon. I'd love to hear it. But on this issue, this is something that is so clear. It's so unequivocal that I think pastors really should have a lot of confidence and a lot of courage in being willing to address this from the pulpit. And I mean, the good news is there are a lot of great resources that are available. Again, if you want to reach out to our organization, California Family Council, californiafamily.org, you can, of course, get all our information either from the convention or you can just go to our website, email us, contact us. We've done a couple of great webinars on these types of issues. We also have as I mentioned, we've partnered with a couple of our allies nationally. Andrew Walker, as I mentioned, has written some great articles and some great books on these. But there's also a great book that just came out, or I should say not a book, a Bible study that just came out from David Clausen. Some of you may have heard him before. He has got his doctorate at Southern. He is right now working with Family Research Council, one of our national allies. He wrote this great Bible study for churches called Male and Female, He Created Them.
Yes.
It's a 8-week Bible study, very approachable, very accessible. And I would love to partner with any of the churches if you guys are interested in bringing that to your own churches, if you'd like to find ways to engage. And again, to your point, Jason, this is not something where we are, going and railing against people who are struggling with gender dysphoria. I mean, I think we have all met people. I'm assuming if you have not met someone yet in your own life that is struggling with gender dysphoria, you're in the increasingly small percentage of people who don't know someone. But I know people. I've met people, even people that I would consider to be friends or professional acquaintances, who sincerely think that they are the opposite gender. And I think the important thing for us to remember is that it is always good and right to be kind to another person. But at the same time, it is never loving to lie to somebody. And there's the whole idea of, well, can't we just use the pronouns that they want to use? Does it really hurt if we're, letting them, play on this team or something like that? And the reality is that our children, our grandchildren, are always watching how we're going to respond to these issues. And if they begin to internalize that it is acceptable to lie to someone to make them feel good, if it's acceptable to lie to ourselves and lie to others to spare the feelings of someone else, that's not a political issue. That's a gospel issue.
That's right.
Because, if you get to that point, why can't you lie to your Muslim neighbor and say, well, maybe Jesus isn't the only way to heaven?
Oh.
Like you said, it's gender dysphoria. Why would you then lie in such a way to where they remain in the dysphoria?
Right.
The loving thing is to help them get out of that.
Absolutely.
To be healed from that. The gospel's healing. And of course, there's a right way and a wrong way to approach it. Mm-hmm. And we're speaking to pastors that we trust. They'll take the wise approach in ministering to any of their people on any of their topic. But the main thing is don't be shy.
That's right.
Don't be afraid of this stuff. Don't listen to the culture. Most of us Christians are together on this, and what's weird is most of the secular world is together on this.
Right.
I mean, please don't drop the ball on this one.
Yeah.
For the love of God.
Well, and to your point, I think that it is something. If we think as believers, well, you know what, I don't want to be outspoken on this. I don't want to. Sometimes I don't think it's as popular now, but for a long time there was this kind of feeling among the church that said, well, look, I have what I believe, and I'm going to preach from the pulpit what I believe, but I don't want to impose my morality on my school board or on my local community. I don't want to. We live in a pluralistic society. We've got atheists, we've got Jews, we've got Muslims, we've got all these different groups that are around here, and we just kind of need to live and let live. Well, the reality is that is not what the secular world is trying to do. They are not wanting to just live and let live.
Right.
And again, when it comes to the idea of this natural law, like the basic kind of core functions of reality, and what is more core or basic than male and female, we have to be willing to give a biblical defense of what the truth is. And that might mean for you, pastor, or for other people who are listening, it might mean that you need to go speak up at your daughter's school board meeting. Again, not so that you're getting on the news and you're getting dragged away in handcuffs, but something where you can go and you can mention some of the statistics. You can mention the biology and the different types of studies on this. It might mean that you're able to change hearts and minds of people who had never heard that because they've never been inside the church before.
Right. And if not you, who?
Exactly. Yep.
Wow. Well, that's a good discussion, guys. For all of our churches who are looking to get those resources, you want to remind them one more time where they can go?
Yeah. You can go to californiafamily.org and if you go on there, we've got lots of resources both on our website and a ton of resources also. I'll say we have a wonderful outreach director who does a lot with social media. If you go on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube especially, tons of videos on YouTube.
And just to pick up where we've been talking about sort of gender identity and things like that, there's something in June.
Yes. So on that note, some of you also may be familiar. It'd be hard to miss over the last 10 years that June is usually Pride Month.
But it's not supposed to be anymore, right?
Well, that's the funny thing. I think that it is, they're still trying to make it Pride Month. I know that the state legislature here in California is definitely going to try to do that. But we're going to be hosting another event a couple weeks from now, June 12th. We will be at the Capitol, on the steps of the Capitol, doing a special kind of Christian response to Pride Month. And we're going to have men and women from both across the state, and I think even some from around the nation. They're going to be with us, just sharing their testimonies of how the Lord changed their lives, whether they had been living a transgender lifestyle or whether they had been living a homosexual lifestyle, and the way that God came and changed their heart and their mind and has now redeemed their life. I'm really excited about this. It's actually, we're doing it on June 12th. Some people might say, well, that's a Thursday. Why are you doing it just kind of a random day? This is because 7 years ago, June 12th of 2018, we hosted a similar rally at the Capitol on this type of an issue. And that year we saw God really answer prayers. We had hundreds of people show up and hear these testimonies. We were fighting this one really bad bill that was restricting freedom of speech for pastors and churches. At the end of that legislative session, yes, even here in California, the very last day of the legislative session, after we had done that rally, the author of the bill issued a press release and said, after meeting with pastors and churches and doing a tour around the state, I've decided to withdraw my bill.
I remember that.
I mean, it was a total miracle.
Yep.
I mean, this is in a state where you talk about, an 80-20 type of an issue. At that time in 2018, this is something where this particular bill had a lot of support in the legislature. It had already passed both houses of the legislature. There was just one amendment that they had done, and they just needed literally a voice vote. They didn't have to have testimony. They didn't need to have witnesses. They just needed to have a voice vote. And the author of that bill, in his press release, specifically cited his conversation with pastors and churches as the reason he was withdrawing the bill. And to clarify, this was a legislator who himself is gay, who identifies as a gay man. And yet, it was just a reminder for us that our Lord is never too short to save. You never know how he's going to show up when we are faithful in answering the call.
Yeah. So again, be courageous, be truthful, just what you guys have been saying the whole time. Well, I think we need to do another one with you. Maybe next year, have everybody send their hardest questions to Jonathan Keller and see how that goes.
Yes. You can stump me on the air. That'd be great.
I think that would be fun.
Yes.
Well, we can't wrap till we get a funny story,
Okay. So I know you were telling me ahead of time that I had to come up with a funny story, and I was trying to think of something good. And it's kind of funny since we were talking about God's design for marriage and sexuality. So I will tell you the story. This is going to, hopefully no one just clips this out of context, but I will tell you. When I was 20 years old, I remember getting fear of God put into me because I was on my way to go home. I'd been hanging out with some friends on a Saturday night, playing video games, as 20-year-olds do.
Okay.
And I was getting ready to go speak at a church on Sunday morning. And I'm here in Fresno. And for those of you in Fresno, Blackstone Avenue it's not the worst part of town, but you don't want to be there at midnight on a Saturday night. Oh. So I am going back to my office at the time. I'm getting ready to pull in and pick up a video projector and a screen and everything. And I'm waiting here at the light, waiting for it to turn. And I see some random young lady who's standing over here on the street corner.
Oh,
the girl street corner
on the street corner.
Of Griffith and Blackstone at about midnight on a Saturday.
Okay.
And when it's midnight and you're just exhausted and you're just kind of like zoning out a little bit, I didn't realize that I kind of was zoning out, and I like accidentally locked eyes with her. And she kind of looks at me and I go, oh. And I, looked away. The light turns green. I turn left and I, pull around here. I pull into the parking lot and I'm getting ready to go out to the office, grab all my stuff. And all of a sudden on the hood of my car, I look up and it is this young lady who was there.
Oh no.
And I literally almost died. At first I thought I was going to get robbed or something. And then I step out and I say, can I help you? And just to put this in context, I'm a 20-year-old former homeschool kid, so I'm socially awkward. I did not have a girlfriend or anything at the time. And, this young lady who was probably around my age or so, she goes, "Oh, I just saw you, in the car, and I thought maybe you were looking for a date."
Oh, no.
And I went,
I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable.
and I almost fainted at this point. And so the two things I'm thinking in my head are, number one, maybe I'm still going to get robbed because her pimp's around the corner or something. Or number two, this is an undercover police officer and I'm about to get arrested. And I was like, no, I'm just picking up something from the office. That's all. That's all. And she goes, and I felt a tiny bit bad because I was so aggressively refusing. I actually looked like I kind of hurt her feelings a little bit. But I was like, no, thank you. I'm good. God bless. Have a good day.
Oh my golly.
So that was maybe one of the most uncomfortable things that has ever happened to me in person. So
wow. I've not lived in Fresno for very long, and this is the first time hearing about Blackstone.
So yes, I would just if you get all the way up north to River Park, you're fine. But if you're south of Shaw, where the office is here, if you get over to Blackstone and you go much farther south, it's a little sketchy. So
Good to know.
I would just say for everybody listening, for all the young men, just always keep your head on a swivel and don't go anywhere after dark after midnight on a Saturday night. Don't make that mistake.
Don't make eye contact.
No,
right.
Nothing good can happen after that midnight on a Saturday night.
Ooh, boy. To the guy who works in politics, I don't know. There's something there. There's a connection of some sort.
Yeah, it still makes my skin. This is literally 20 plus years ago, and still makes me heebie-jeebies.
Were you raised in a Christian home?
I was, and that was fortunately. I was as a result of that. I think I had a lot of that.
Fear of God.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
oh yes.
I could hear that.
Very much.
You're like, there's no
You're
way
sweating
this girl's
a little
going to
right now.
Oh yeah, I know. I am.
I am going to die right
Yes.
here.
Even in retrospect, I was like, either it's a lightning bolt or police cuffs, and I'm no, thank you.
Good job, parents.
That's
Good
right.
job.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for your enduring partnership with Southern Baptists in California.
It's an honor to be part of the CSBC extended family, and grateful to be back on the show as always.
And fun little fact for our diehard old school Southern Baptists in California, the person who made the motion for California Family Council to have their 5 minutes, which is now, in the governing documents, Wiley Drake.
Oh, wow. That is old school. That's amazing.
That is an old school name. And if you know, you know. I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Wiley.
I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. Thanks for listening, everybody. As always, we have an email address, podcast@csbc.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.